All right, we're back here with our second episode of Casthammer. Lore Master Sotek and I delivering to you guys pretty much all the Games Workshop news that we can kind of summarize or kind of jam into one video across the tabletop, across video games, across the RPGs, pretty much everything. So I am your host with my co-host with my host, whatever we want to say here, with Lore Master Sotek joining us. So Lore Master, our theme for this episode is Dark Elves. Yeah?
Is it now?
Do I have a spicy question for you? Would you rather be in Marathi's sex harem or Malekith's like right-hand guy, like lieutenant, second in command type individual?
So would I rather be a nobody or would I rather be Corin Darkhand?
You could look at it that way. I kind of look at it as, would you rather be punished via sex slavery, or would you rather be punished for slightly failing someone, if you consider it failing?
So, okay. I think for the way I personally... I think I would rather be... you know what? I'd honestly go with the harem. And not because the sex answer, but... because being Malekith's right-hand man means that you're going to have an important job, and it's not a case of if, it's a case of when you screw up. Malekith's court is literally like only 60% actually alive people,
right.
And the rest of them are just corpses sitting in chairs as reminders, and a lot of them did not die pleasantly.
Dude,
I feel like even if Morthy was going to kill me, it would be kind of an offhand, like, spell out of anger, but I'd probably get
sexual
to
anger
live for a while, and maybe even become important enough or good enough to, like, be kept alive as a pet, if nothing else. Malekith, though, you're boned so fast.
Dude.
Like, I am way too irresponsible of a person to be Malekith's right. I'd get killed so fast.
Dude, I tell you, I'm totally on board with that, because it's like, what if you draw these amazing battle plans? You're like, okay, my Lord Malekith, we'll do this. We'll advance against the Mungs in the north, and then as soon as he steps out for the very first action of the battle plan, he puts his foot down and he hears a slushing noise, and he looks you in the eye and goes, "I hate snow." You're like, oh.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like, not only do you have to worry about if things go wrong, you're dead. It's also, if you get too good at your job,
right,
you're probably dead, because Malekith won't suffer a threat. And you have to worry about everyone below you trying to kill you to take your spot. Like, that would be so stressful.
It's a lose-lose. It's a lose-lose.
It's way less stressful.
It sounds like being a slave is the best position to be in the Dark Elf Society, if you ask me. But
it's certainly better than Malekith's right-hand man. No, I'm gonna go with the sex slave. That's my final answer.
Oh god. Okay, so we got a lot to cover here today. Lore Master Sotek's going to be probably leading the charge here from the start. We'll be talking about Age of Sigmar, some Imperial Knights, some of the various computer games, and then we'll talk about some of the kind of DLC speculation and stuff like that for Total War Warhammer 2. But Sotek, lead us off with some Age of Sigmar 2.0 action, because I don't know a goddamn thing.
Okay, great. So, to lead us in, just like 2 weeks ago, we're building up to Age of Sigmar 2nd Edition, which releases this month. So, right now, we're kind of getting into that part where they're just dropping goodies literally every day. So, they've been doing what's called a faction focus every day, which is basically they just look at a faction in Age of Sigmar and they talk about their current place in the, like, kind of the meta and the lore, and where they're going in the future, which has led a lot of, which is basically making the community crazy, because it's just opening up all these interesting theories and ideas on a daily basis.
Right. As
we see how these factions are evolving going into Age of Sigmar 2.0, which, so everything, since we last talked 2 weeks ago, we've had the endless spells thoroughly revealed, which are just like magical vortexes from Fantasy or Total War Warhammer, except for they're actually represented by models on the field. So,
I saw that.
Yeah, there's an actual, and we'll put a link so you can see the community page in the description down below. But on some of the faction focuses, like on the Bone Splitters one, you can see the Penundral Pendulum, which is now called the Ether Void Pendulum, has an actual model for it. And all these spells, the reason they're called endless is because if you summon them, they can literally be endless, and they just run across the field killing everybody they run into and doing terrible things. And there are all sorts of crazy looking ones. They've released an official model for Burning Skull. They've released a model for Purple Sun, which is a giant skull that looks like, you know, those pictures of the germs where they have like all the little probes coming off of them. It kind of looks like that, but it has a skull face and it's purple.
Yeah, I remember the Magic School Bus where the antibodies attack the germs.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like that. And then you've got, and there's one that's like just this collection of flying swords.
Yeah, which one? What spell is that? I saw that.
I don't remember the actual name of it, but it's a buff spell, if you can believe it or not. I think instead of a damage spell, it gives like a significant buff to the people it runs into as it aids them in their fight. There's also a swarm of locust. It's called the swarm of emerald. I think it's like swarm of emerald life or something like that. But it's a healing spell that also is going to have a model. It's like a bunch of flying dragonflies made out of pure life energy and just all sorts of crazy stuff like that. So that's very exciting. Then they've released the new shooting rules, which now we have a Lookout Sir coming to Age of Sigmar, which was desperately needed because a lot of people would play Age of Sigmar and you bring all your favorite characters who are all support characters and they just get sniped turn one by like a cannon or a bolter or something because there was nothing to protect them. Right. Like in 40K, there is a protection for characters, but in Age of Sigmar, there wasn't. So they've listened to the community complaints about that and have finally put in a Lookout Sir rule, which makes it much more difficult to target those characters, which is great.
Right.
Then they revealed the new combat rules, which are now moving to be more like 40K, which I think is better, where Age of Sigmar had a problem where you had to when you charged into a unit, you had to pile in all your guys, which means like moving everyone in so they can reach on the closest enemy model, which was dumb because it would lead to your unit kind of bulking up on a single flank instead of surrounding the enemy, which makes way more sense. Well, now they've rewritten the rules so you can move in any direction so long as at the end of your move you end up closer to your enemy, just like it is in 40K. So now you're going to be able to see wraparounds and a lot more complicated close combat phases in Age of Sigmar. On top of that, they've revealed a new rule set that a lot of us, myself included, are very excited for, which is that there are now going to be rules for match play. So this isn't just for like fluff. This is for like tournaments.
Right.
There's match play rules for you have to figure out which of the 8 or 9 realms you're fighting in. And depending on which realm you're fighting in, there are different rules that affect the battlefield. For instance, if you're fighting in the realm of Akshi or the realm of fire, if you use shooting attacks, if the shooting attack is aiming at a target that's more than 12 inches away, all the projectiles catch on fire, so they do 1 additional damage if they score a hit.
So all these like these rules that are being added, these rules that are being like revamped, how do you think that they'll affect more? Like, okay, your LSG play, or are you looking local game store? Yeah, local game LG.
I think they're going to have a significant impact on both.
Well, I mean, like, is it more tournament stuff is what I'm asking. Like, is this more geared at making this a more competitive tournament-based game that hopefully draws a bigger tournament community? Or do you think it's a little bit more geared at making it more accessible in your local game store? Because I personally never saw 8th edition as a hurdle to play in my local game store.
Yeah. So I think what they've decided, I think they've looked at the game and they've realized that the game has been getting more and more complicated the longer it evolves. Each army book basically came out with some kind of new thing. Like originally the army books were very simple and straightforward. Then they started getting their own magic items, and they started getting their own magic lores. Then they started getting their own command abilities. Like they started getting more and more complicated. And so what Age of Sigmar 2.0 is doing is it's really ramping up the complicated aspect of the game. But they're very cleverly doing it by just doing kind of minute changes and updating all of the old factions to be in line with the new factions. But they're also making the game much more interesting competitively. A lot of the changes aren't, I think, going to affect your local game store play that much. Like, so obviously some will, like the realms having specific rules will probably be a big deal, especially since every single realm has, I think, 9 unique spells to it that all factions have access to. So it's like the battle lores from Warhammer Fantasy, but everyone has access to them, and they depend on where you're fighting instead of just taking them whenever. But you have those in addition to your own faction's unique spells. So there's a lot more magic in the game considering that when Age of Sigmar first started, you only had one spell per caster, one unique spell, which meant that Magic was very not complicated.
Man, that is not good. I don't like that at all. I'm glad I never touched first, like pre-first edition.
Yeah, it was terrible. You know, you compare that to now, where like if you play Tzeentch, you have 2 Lords of Magic in your book, and you'll have access to the Lords of Magic depending on the realm you're fighting in, which allows you a way more customization. There's also a unique item list, and I think they're saying there's 15 to 20 items for every realm. So depending on what realm you're fighting in, you can even have different kits for your characters. So there's way more customization coming to Age of Sigmar, which it was seriously lacking in, and I'm happy to see. And on top of that, characters are now a lot more meaningful, because in first edition Age of Sigmar, only a single character could use a command ability, which was kind of crappy, because you'd have to basically find out which character had the base command ability, but you might not like that character, but he synergizes better with your army. Now every character can use all their command abilities. So characters have a much more significant impact on the game as support roles, which is really nice. Like, a lot of them are still good fighters and stuff, but most of them, the reason you're going to be bringing them are because you can pack together all their command abilities in really interesting ways. It's a significantly evolving game. So it's starting to look really interesting.
And it sounds like it's really taking a lot of cues from not just Warhammer 40,000 8th edition, but Warhammer 40,000 as a whole, because command points and characters are both pivotal and extremely hard to snipe out in 8th edition.
Yeah, I honestly think they're taking a lot of the things they like from 40k that can be applied to fantasy and applying them, while also reaching back into Warhammer Fantasy 8th edition and bringing things that were really exciting, like vortex spells and stuff. You know, like spells that are very powerful, but they could accidentally backfire depending on what they do. I think it feels like Age of Sigmar is moving into a really nice niche. Obviously, we can't say anything for sure until I have the book in my hands, but from all of the little snippets they've been revealing about the updates to combat, shooting, magic, and all the faction features, it's a very exciting time to be getting into Age of Sigmar. I think second edition is going to be what Age of Sigmar what 8th edition was to 40k, in that it was kind of a massive, not that Age of Sigmar was dying, but it was starting to get bloated under its own issue of all of the rules were constantly advancing with every new book. And the other nice thing we've been confirmed is that all of the FAQs that they've done for the first book are going to be included inside the second book. So you're not going to have to go look up all the FAQ for your factions and everything. All the factions are going to have their own FAQs included in the big rule book. Just it's nice to see Games Workshop centralizing things.
For the first time in 30 years.
Yeah, which is so nice, because it used to be the problem with fantasy, for instance, is that you had to go to so many different places to gather up all the rules you needed. And when they would release expansions, it would make things even more complicated. And it got too bloated.
Right.
And it needed, some fixing. And that leads into a whole other conversation, but I'm not going to get into that. But to basically close out the Age of Sigmar thing, it's looking very exciting. A lot of the factions are getting new lore and new updates. For instance, the Seraphon, which is my favorite faction because they're the Lizardmen. I don't
understand why that would be your favorite. That doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah, no, it's like, oh, I always pegged you for a Goblin player.
Yeah, you definitely would like Lore Master of Sotek and a Lizardman thing. Definitely a Goblin guy.
But so in the Seraphon faction focus, they actually revealed that the Seraphon are evolving. And they're not just, because in the original Seraphon book, it's just that the Seraphon are literally they're not real. They're just the memories of the Slaanesh, through magic given form, and they go out and do things. But now it's been revealed that they're apparently evolving, and in High Azir, which is basically like space on steroids, it's basically heaven, almost in a way, that the Seraphon have started to take on a more permanent form, and they're turning into something other, and they might be building an empire, which could be a huge deal, because originally we were looking at, maybe a couple hundred Slaanesh, and that was basically the entire faction's race. But now it looks like all of the Seraphon are starting to, beyond the Slaanesh, are not only becoming permanent, but they're starting to gain emotions. They're starting to gain personality. They're starting to become physical. And that could have huge implications for the Seraphon's involvement in Age of Sigmar, and it could have implications for their war with Chaos and how things are evolving there. So that's all been very exciting. But when I say that, that's happening with every single faction. Every faction is going through dramatic changes, which a lot of people don't know, but Age of Sigmar 2nd edition, it's like 8th edition for 40K. It's not just a new edition. It's not like we've hit kind of like a year or 2 years and they're like, okay, it's time for a new edition. The reason we're getting a new edition is because something drastic has happened in the world that requires a new edition to bring everyone back to date. So like in 40K, the reason 8th edition happened in the way they explain it was not that it was time for 8th edition, but instead that Chaos pulled off that batshit crazy maneuver that split the galaxy in half. And it had massive implications for everybody because suddenly things were happening. Unlike, if we go back to Warhammer Fantasy or 40K before 8th edition, the difference between editions, nothing changed. Warhammer Fantasy, 6th edition to 7th edition moved forward about 5 to 10 years, and then 7th edition to 8th edition moved backwards because they were retconning so much information, and it was pretty boring.
And also, it was time for a new edition.
Yeah, and also it was time for a new edition. But, if you go back and you read Fantasy 6th, 7th, and 8th edition army books, they don't change very much because they tell the same stories. Like, they might alter them a little bit to include, like, a new special character or something along those lines, but the lore wasn't moving anywhere.
Right.
And so a new edition didn't mean anything other than, hey, we want to put out new army books, so to put out new army books, we're going to update the rules. When we look at Age of Sigmar now, which is taking, of course, another page out of 40K, which 40K has now tossed out the idea of, hey, instead of an edition just being a rule update, what if it was also because something calamitous has happened?
Right. And that's what I understand is going to be the rule going forward, is like these editions are going to coincide with pivotal events that actually move the story forward.
Right, which for Age of Sigmar is that the Malign Portents happened. Mm-hmm. Which, for anyone who's not aware, is Nagash basically gathered all of the power of Shaiish, like the actual magic power. Like, imagine if Warpstone is Chaosbane Manifest, there's this stuff called, there's this black sand that's a material called
dark matter. I believe it's talking about dark matter.
Yeah, it's basically dark matter. It's like the Warpstone of Shaiish, so it's death magic made physical. He's gathered all of it and built it into a single structure, which is the new Great Black Pyramid of Nagash, which is, of course, instead of being a regular pyramid, it's an upside-down pyramid, because fucking Nagash. But anyway, but because he's done this, it's caused this horrible ripple of side effects through all the realms, because he's basically gathered so much magical power together in one place that it's having distortions on, like, time and space within Shaiish, which is messing with a lot of stuff. And then that's also distorting all the other realms, where they're having all these crazy things happen. And the Malign Portents campaign, which a lot of us didn't realize this until very recently, the Malign Portents campaign was not the actual event. So it wasn't like the Storm of Chaos, for instance, where you played through the campaign and you know everything that happened by playing through it. Malign Portents, you just played through building up to what actually has happened.
Right.
So we had a summer campaign for the Malign Portents that wrapped up. It wasn't a summer campaign; it was a spring campaign that wrapped up a little while ago. And a lot of us thought that was it, like that was the end. But it wasn't. That was literally just the beginning.
That's the same thing they're doing with 8th edition too, with Warhammer 40,000.
Yeah, they did the campaign with the Ultramar.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people probably thought a similar thing, where it's like, oh, this might build up to Ultramar getting blown up, or it's rigged, or whatever. I still think it was rigged, but they weren't going to let us blow up Ultramar.
All those things are rigged, man.
Yeah, but like Malign Portents was crazy. There was some insane bullshit that happened in Malign Portents. This is supposed to be a fantasy universe, and one of the things that happened is the people fighting Nagash. There was a giant chaos moon controlled by Korgus Kul, who is like the Corn Lord for Age of Sigmar right now. He was about to drop a moon on everybody, and the way they beat him for a time, which the way he got the moon, and then the reason this is important, and we'll be moving on to the next subject in a moment.
Yeah, I was gonna say we got to start going. You and I are getting down a rabbit hole again.
Yeah, the reason he has a stupid moon is because when he tried to take control of it, a very powerful Slann and an army of Seraphon went to stop him, and they crippled his army, but he won and got the moon. So what happens in Malign Portents is as this moon is coming down and having a drastic effect, and Khorne starts eclipsing everyone else, all of the other factions, a group of the good guys get together and they fire a chrono cannon at him. And you might be thinking, what the hell is a chrono? It's a time cannon. So they shoot this time cannon at a falling Majora's Mask style moon, except for with a chaos skull on it instead of that creepy face. It hits the moon, and to Korgos' Cool's horror, instead of nobody knew what it was going to do. But when it hits the moon, what it proceeds to immediately do is it resurrects the entire Seraphon army, who immediately start attacking again. And Korgos Cool is like, are you serious? So the moon goes whirling off into space because the Slann redirects it, and he has to fight that fight all over again. And he might not win it this time. And that moon fight wasn't out of nowhere either. That was a huge engagement that was very important during the Realm Gate Wars. And one of the most minor updates in the Malign Portents basically scrubbed that entire engagement, and now the Seraphon might have a chance to take that moon back. Like, that's how crazy bullshit we're talking about in Age of Sigmar. And this is all just building up to 2nd edition, which we still don't know what Nagash has done.
That sounds like some wild anime level stuff.
It does feel like it. But I'm enjoying it a lot. And some of it's crazy, some of it's not. A lot of the stories are pretty actually low to the ground, where, you know, we have like little intrigue plots going on in certain cities. And that's one thing they're doing in 2.0 that a lot of people are looking forward to, is that, and I saw this on a Lorecast, they were talking about a lot of the focus for the 2nd Age and what Malign Portents has done features on the little guys. Like how the farmers are handling it, and the average Joe, and the free peoples, and the dispossessed. Because a lot of people were kind of like, the high fantasy is cool, but I can't really relate to any of this.
Right.
You know, I want to relate to people. But anyway, so Age of Sigmar, very exciting. I'm sure we'll put out a podcast talking about when it actually drops. But in any event, I think it's time to jump into some 40K and let you take over for a little bit.
Yeah, I'll give you a break here. You've talked so much. God damn it!
I'm grabbing a bottle of water.
So we do know that the Imperial Knights Codex is coming out here. Actually, it's out this Saturday. If this drops on Wednesday, and there's a lot of stuff that they're doing here. And Warhammer 40,000 has done a lot of really cool things with its new codexes. It's really done a lot of really great ways to add a lot of flavor. I know, Lore Master, you're playing Tyranids a lot, and yep. So are you? Before I jump into Imperial Knights a ton, are you enjoying Tyranids?
Yes, I love 8th edition Tyranids. Like, okay. I got the collector's edition book, and I can say for a fact I don't regret it. They are very fun to play.
Good. Now, hey, is this your first foray into 40K? Is 8th edition?
Yep. I wanted nothing to do with 40K beforehand.
That's funny, because I want nothing to do with Age of Sigmar until my light elves come out. But
fucking angel elves.
No, I haven't looked at the Tyranid Codex for 8th edition. I looked at it. I played them in like 5th or 6th, and I've looked at it in 7th. So I can only imagine what they did for 8th. Now with the Imperial Knights Codex, I didn't look at it in the 7th edition, but I have looked at it heavily for what's coming out in 8th. And 8th edition is really cool because it's almost like they're trying to make Bretonnia in the Imperial Knights Codex. Like, you have all these really cool ways of taking. No, they're not knightly vows like they are for Bretonnia in fantasy, but they're kind of like that. You can essentially like build out your own knight, and that with your warlord, you're basically your main leading knight, and that knight can have 1 or 2 boons more or less, and then he's got to have abilities that kind of counter that. So basically, you've got this guy who can be a really cool big badass, but he's going to have some things that basically weigh him down. And it's really cool. You roll on a table. There are these basically a range of warlord traits, and so basically you can have one that's like, looking at the community site, you've got Ion Bulwark, and then you've got like Land Strider, and then as a as a kind of like an effect of these, you have to take contrary traits to them. So if you choose one positive, you have to choose one contrary, and two, obviously, then you're going to make your second one. So it's pretty cool how they did it. They added some really cool artifacts in there as well. They put a lot of emphasis on free blades, because you can actually build the free blades out, so you can have, you know, a quality or a burden. Those what I was kind of talking about. So it's really cool how you basically generate and build these free blades to be very different. It's almost like building your own chapter in I think it was 7th edition and 6th edition. I think you both could build your own Space Marine chapter in those, and you could choose specific traits, and if you chose a trait, you had to also choose something that was negative. You had major and minor traits. So it's basically their way of kind of like, hey, how do you choose your own adventure? How do you make your own knight, and what house does he apply to? Because there's different houses that you can choose on, like House Gryffindor, House Slytherin. I'm kidding, it's not actually like that, but they're very similar names, like almost freakishly so. So you pretty much are building this really cool knight out how you want it to play and how you want to field it. And there's a new class of knights as well. So the Imperial Knights Codex isn't just simply like a, hey, here's a facelift on something that's already new to 7th edition. Here's our way of really making the knights kind of have a lot more to them. You know, there's your Dominus class, your Armiger class, your Questoris class. And it's really I think it's really cool. And you have your Ion Aegis, which is a really cool ability they've got, which costs 2 command points, and you basically project the shield that's around Imperial Knights natively down below them, and it's a 5-up invulnerable save, which is really cool. It only works against ranged weapons, but it's cool. So if they're around kind of its feet, it's basically the Imperial Knights way of protecting and ensuring that those servants around him are safe. I think that the Imperial Knights Codex is a really cool kind of like at least flavorful approach to what is often like. You know, here's a problem I have with 40k, and you might have seen this, Sotek, is like there's all these large centerpieces. You've got your Riptide, or whatever the large, I think it's Riptide, right? Riptide is the large Tau battle suits.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, so you've got these large Riptide battle suits, you've got these knights, and we're getting some stuff. The Tyranids have really big monsters too, and there's going to be updated models for the Warhammer for the Chaos, and I guess that's a kind of a good thing to talk about. Is supposedly we'll be getting an Abaddon refresh with the model, and
I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, exactly right. And oh god, what's his name? The Khorne Worldbreaker or whatever, the big like, basically like 1980s mech warrior with an upper body of like a Khorne Dreadnought destroyer thing. That's supposed to be getting a new model, so it'll be interesting to see what they do. But one thing I really don't want to see happen in Warhammer 40,000 is the landscape being dominated by these larger than life, humongous models, which are really cool centerpieces, but I've never looked at Warhammer 40,000 on that scale. Everything I've read about Warhammer 40,000, it's always like cool when a Titan steps in, or there's maybe a chapter or 2 on a Titan or something of the sort. And I know that free blades and the Imperial Knights as a whole are smaller than Titans, but obviously larger than Dreadnoughts. But I still think it's like you tread a dangerous ground when you make like $180. It's not $180, but I'm saying a significantly expensive model that then dominates.
You know, a lot of people would argue that's what killed fantasy, was that it became less about the core of the game, which was like infantry blocks and cav and stuff, and it became about these ludicrously huge models.
Right. I mean, Nagash during the end times was fucking huge. Cool, but huge.
Yeah, and Age of Sigmar, thankfully, has started to ramp in the other direction, where we're starting to get more chill stuff and backing off on the giant two. Because I don't know if you remember, but 8th edition fantasy was literally every edition was you maybe got a new unit, but every faction was guaranteed to get a dual kit monster. That was massive.
Your Troglodyte, your Carnosaur, your Khemri,
Ragnarok spiders, your Stonehorns, your new dragons. Like they were everywhere.
Your Terrorgeist, or what's it called? God, what's the other Terrorgeist thing? Zombie Dragon or Terrorgeist?
Zombie Dragon, yeah. Like there were almost every single faction had them, and a lot of people look at that as one of the hallmarks of why fantasy fell.
And I think
hopefully, and I don't think that's going to happen to 40k necessarily.
No, absolutely not.
I what I say is I agree with you that I hope Games Workshop is careful about not just focusing on making new models for big stompy things, but making sure to keep the core of the game supported.
Right, because it's not Space Marines and Games Workshop. It's Games Workshop. And what has made Games Workshop cool is that, sure, Space Marines exist, and that's fucking rad. And Stormcast Eternals exist, and that is what that is. But there's also Elves, there's also Eldar, there's also Orcs, there's also Greenskins. Like, it's important that, yes, we all know that Space Marines make the most money per launch. But if you try to jam them down our throat, then you start to lose what makes 40K and what makes Warhammer Fantasy so unique, different, and awesome as far as high fantasy and gothic sci-fi go, grimdark sci-fi go. So I hope we don't get in this repeating motif, this trend of just like, oh, here's this new gigantic cast model for the upcoming army in 8th edition. It's like, oh, okay, I can calm the fuck down and just enjoy a refresh of the existing models. Like, if they released Chaos and didn't add a single model, but just refresh the Khorne Berserkers, the Chaos Standard Marine models, I'd say the Devastators are pretty cool already. Not the Devastators, the guys that mutate weapons. I'd say that they got a pretty good refresh not too long ago. But or any of the special characters, I'd be so happy. Like the Blood Angels, I was mad that Codex just added a Primaris special sprue or whatever, and didn't just revamp the 15-year-old Mephiston model. Or the Commander Dante, who just I'm gonna kit bash a Sanguinary Guard and make a Commander Dante. Like, that's where I think that Games Workshop loses, in that it doesn't focus on what it is already established as good. Like, oh, okay, not broke, don't fix it. Just make a better model. Like, Mephiston is a very coveted and used model in the Blood Angels line. Let's just make a better one. That's what I kind of wish they would do with a lot of stuff, rather than releasing things and putting Band-Aid on the old things. Just make one edition. Make like an 8.5 or make a Sigmar 2.5 and just change what's already there and make it better. I mean, they've got these sculpts that can be so much more detailed now. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I generally agree with that, and it just comes down to the way that Games Workshop decides to work on it or look at it. Like a ton of people are hoping that for the Death faction that there's going to be a Tomb King's return, which may be the case because they had gorgeous construct models. The problem was that the old line, so like not the War Sphinx and the Necrosphinx, but everything else,
all the Skeleton Warriors,
super bad and old. Look, like it looked terrible. And a lot of people are hoping that the reason they took off the Tomb King line is that they're going to make a return, and when they do, they're going to have brand new shiny skeletons that actually look really good.
Well, it's the same reason the High Elves had an amazing elite infantry that got updated almost every edition. 6th, 7th, and 8th have different white lions. Phoenix Guard got an update in 8th. Dragon Princess got an update in 7th, I believe. And Lothern Sea Guard finally got decent models that weren't crappy pewter ones in 8th. But the Spearmen are the same ones since 5th edition or 6th edition. Like they're
I think the only way to get a good looking Spearman model was to buy the Storm Isle set.
Yeah.
It was the starter set with 8th edition, which had custom models for everything. Blood Isle, yeah. And like the Spearmen in that, gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous.
Those are Lothern Sea Guard.
Yeah, and it was one of the most popular sets.
Yeah.
Because people wanted those like the Rat Ogres and the Clan Rats, like they were all unique and gorgeous, and that set sold stupidly well. And I feel like Games Workshop doesn't realize that a lot of the time, is that you don't have to release some big new shiny toy.
Right.
Like, just make all the core troops, just update them, and people will buy the shit out of that.
That's what I'm playing with. That's what I'm going to be painting the most. Like, yeah, sure, I'm going to spend the 15 hours to paint the shit out of my Imperial Knight and make sure it looks awesome, but you damn well bet I'm going to be also painting 30 Space Marines that are boring. Like, I could have dealt without Primaris, gotten the Primaris model to replace all the Space Marine models and just to increase their stat line. Albeit I would have been a little angry, but I would have been like, you know what, these new Marine models are just rad. And I would have probably been set for another 20 years of Marine models. That Marine model hasn't changed since 5th edition, since I remember. But
yeah.
All right, enough of that. Let's kind of push on here. Let's talk a little bit about but just some computer games. Now we've kind of hit on the tabletop portion of it, and clearly we've ranted. let's get into it
But
back.
before we get into games, just real quick as an announcement.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. Before we get into it, just because it leads into it, but we're transitioning now to RPG and tabletop, and then we'll go to full RPG.
Right.
So for those of you that are interested, the Warhammer 4th Edition role-playing game has started pre-orders, and the PDF go out this month, and the physical copies go out next month. Now, the nice thing is, if you go pre-order it, you can get the physical copy and the PDF in bundles for just the purchase of one of them. So, like, you just buy the physical copy and you also get the PDF. I've already made my pre-orders. They're not cheap. I will say that. They're very not cheap.
Oh, yeah.
I
You just
think
bought the collector's edition, right?
I think the basic rule set for 4th edition is like 50 British pounds. So these are, no, I think it's actually 60 British pounds. But whatever it is, they are not cheap. I am a shill and picked up the collector's edition, but there will be more news about that once we know more details. But for those of you who are interested and want to look into it, we'll put, at least on my channel, I'll put a link in the description where you can go check it out. But now we can move into the actual computer game stuff.
Yes, but it is important to know that that collector's edition looks awesome. You were spending like
it does.
10
It's
minutes
a
buying it
sexy
before, and you're like,
collector.
this is
I wouldn't have bought it if it didn't look good.
Yeah. Okay, so computer games to talk about. Let's talk about the first one, and this was actually announced with the Skull Throne DLC, or I'm sorry, not DLC, sale that they did on Steam.
Skulls for the Skull Throne.
Yeah, thank
Skull
you.
Throne sale. There we go.
The sale thing that happened just over the weekend. I think it ended today, actually.
Yes, it did.
But we saw that Chaosbane is a new action RPG that's coming out. And you guys don't know what an ARPG is, just think Diablo. So Chaosbane is coming out for, I think it was PC and PS4, as I bring it up real quick. And I mean, honestly, I'm all for it. Expected release on PC and console. So we don't have a lot of information. We don't have any information aside from 2 screenshots, which are just super innocuous. So I'm really excited about it because it kind of takes a lot of what we're about to get into next here is did you play yeah, you played Diablo too, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I played all the Diablos. Diabli.
Dude, I'm excited for whatever the hopeful next Diablo is. I mean, I love ARPGs. I mean, I played
Hey, stay on topic.
I played Titan Quest. All those, like, I mean, there's so many clones, like a Path of Exile.
RPGs are awesome, but they are so easy to do wrong.
They are.
Not in the sense of like being broken, but in the sense of being repetitive and unrewarding. They are very difficult to get right.
Like Hellgate London, wasn't a fan of that. Was not a fan of that. But you can play as a human, a high elf, a wood elf, or a dwarf. So you're going to be going through places.
Oh, it's fantasy.
Yeah, Chaosbane is fantasy, 100% fantasy.
Oh, I thought it was 40K. Okay.
Oh, no. That's Inquisitor Martyr, which we're going to talk about next. And the reason we're talking about it next is Chaosbane is going to be developed by the exact same studio, Eco Software. So it's really, really interesting because they've already kind of solidified a formula with Warhammer 40,000 Inquisitor Martyr, which is going to be, I guess, the first in a series of action RPGs in the 40K universe. And the cool thing about Inquisitor Martyr, it just got a new patch, and by the time that this actually airs, because we're recording this here on the 4th, it's going to come out on the 6th, the game will have now fully been released. And I was playing one of the final beta patches over the weekend with the new stuff, and it is great. Like, it's come like so far since October when I first played it. What
company is producing this?
Eco Software, EKO Software.
Huh.
And they also made How to Survive. I'm sorry, Big Ben Interactive is the company that made 40K Inquisitor Martyr. So
okay,
they are the same. I think the same publishing house or developing house. I'm not really sure, but they are related in some way, shape, or form. So hopefully. And hopefully when the full release of Martyr comes out, we'll get like that final little polish that kind of tells us of things that are yet to come with Chaosbane, because I don't know. I mean, you should be playing Martyr with me. I think you dig it because it kind of like, it feels like Dark Heresy, the 40K Warhammer Fantasy.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm looking at it now. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, because Dark Heresy is super difficult, and you can be like an Arbiter. You can be like basically what becomes an Inquisitor because you have to rank your.
No, I'm totally down to check it out.
Yeah, and it's just because you remember you played Fantasy Warhammer Fantasy.
Oh, it came out today. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it literally was coming out in like an hour. But you played Fantasy Second and Third Edition of RPG, right?
Second. I never played third. I played third very briefly, realized what it was, and threw it away.
Okay, so I never played third. But second, you know how you basically, your character ranks up and essentially becomes cooler, right?
Yeah, you start off as trash, but if you survive long enough, you can become the greatest in the galaxy, yeah.
Well, same thing with Dark Heresy. And Dark Heresy, like, you go from an Arbiter to becoming like basically an Inquisitor. So basically, that's kind of like this. You can choose three classes: Crusader, Assassin, and Psyker. And I think they're adding a fourth. I don't really know which one it is though. And honestly, they matched. They got the environment down. I really enjoyed the actual gameplay of it. It's a little clunky here and there because it is an independent studio. But I don't know, man. I think they nailed it. And if it's anything, I mean, Chaosbane is just like, why isn't there?
Oh yeah, I'm looking at it. It doesn't look bad.
Yeah, right.
I'm looking at it right now.
I mean, like, why isn't there already an ARPG? I mean, I don't have any Warhammer ARPGs before this. Do you?
Games Workshop refused to sell games to companies that knew what they were doing until about 5 years ago.
Yeah, seriously, dude. Like, oh man. Now it's just raining. Like every other month, there's a release of some sort of game from one company with the Games Workshop tag on it. But I guess on the note of computer games, before we jump over topics here, we got 2 more computer games to talk about. Now, have you played Space Hulk Deathwing?
I have never played Deathwing. I wanted to, and then I saw some not great reviews, and that was the end of that.
Did you ever play the actual like tabletop card game?
No, I never. I had a very strong aversion to 40K until I was in my 20s.
Okay. Have you ever stubbed your toe on like a door or a cabinet or a bookcase?
What human hasn't?
Okay, good answer. Now, picture stubbing your toe, and then as you're recovering from stubbing your toe, you stub it again. That's how painful Space Hulk the card game is. It is so unforgiving. Like, you're just constantly being bent over by the game's mechanics. Like, you're stacked against you. The game Space Hulk Deathwing is very considerably hard. I'll be honest with you, Indie Pride and I have only played it duos. We've never like done like a full team of 4, which I'm sure probably actually is considerably easier. But
probably yes.
They just released the enhanced edition, which basically allows you to customize armor, customize weapons. You can basically choose individual talents and skills more or less per class, so it makes you so you can play every single class how you want to play the class.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they basically kind of added a lot of RPG mechanics to it. Otherwise, the game just felt like crap. Like, think of playing.
Yeah, well, and that's what I heard. Is that when it first came out, I heard it was a little too repetitive and not interesting enough.
Yeah, because
but it sounds like they might have fixed that.
You progress through some basic generic weapon unlocks in the very first one, but now the enhanced edition, you are striving through a currency that you get for either winning or failing, that you can use to spend to change the way your guy looks, change the way his weapons fire, or the way his melee weapons do damage. And so it's a lot better. It's like basically adding the whole entire talent system from Vermintide 2 into 1.
Oh, neat. Okay, that's cool.
And also the fact that like Vermintide 1 has a better drop system. There's no drop system in Space Hulk Deathwing.
Great.
With this, it kind of adds it. But speaking of Vermintide 2 came out with a big content
transition.
Right?
Or,
you like how I did that?
Yeah, perfect transition. Not even like, oh man, expert level. So yes, there was a major update released for Vermintide. There was an event going on this weekend, which might be over now, which was the Skulls for the Skull Throne, of course. And what they did was, they added in something that I think is really cool, which is this new system called Ockery's Challenges, which are from Cousin Ockery. And what they are is they're basically it's just an achievement system. But instead of being like on your Steam page and you get it and you're like, woohoo, it's actually in-game. And whenever you accomplish an achievement, you unlock rewards. In most of the cases, it's a chest. Many of the chests are actually very high tier. But the really difficult ones, like getting a character to level 30 and like beating every map on Legend with a certain character, you actually unlock cosmetics. So there's actually a reliable way to get them other than just rolling and hoping that you get some red chests that don't completely suck. They also added a bunch of new stuff into the game. They did a bunch of tweaks. They fixed a couple of the bugs and some concerns with the maps, and they increased drop rates on red items, which of course was super nice of them to do.
Wasn't there?
I saw somebody in my Discord got 3 red items. Like all 3 of their chests had a red.
This is horseshit. I've never even gotten a single one.
Yeah, but
let alone an orange. Or
the game is looking awesome, and the cousin archery challenges, a lot of them are super fun and interesting too. Like you have a couple where it's like you if you play on a map on a certain difficulty, you have to get a warp fire thrower to kill like 30 Skaven.
Ooh.
So if you've ever played any games from Blizzard, like Diablo 3 or StarCraft 2, they have a lot of interesting challenges, like beat a map in a certain amount of time, or accomplish this random mission, or beat this boss without getting hit. They've basically done that now in Vermintide 2. It's literally the exact same, where it's like, if you play on the map where you have to save the people in cages, you have to rescue all the people in 60 seconds, which is pretty hard. Or like, if you fight a troll, don't let anybody get hit. Nobody can get hit with vomit. And so it's very interesting and adds another level of play, so that you're not just suffering trying to play through the maps. There's actual fun objectives you can be accomplishing, and you're actually trying to achieve something, which I think adds another level for those I enjoy the game just for the gameplay, but I think having things to strive for while you're playing is an important aspect of any game.
Absolutely. That's like half the fun of Vermintide 2 is feel at least you're moving up towards something, and they did that better in 2 than they did in 1. I feel like I'm always progressing every single actual mission.
Yeah, and so the Akri's challenges are a great addition in my opinion, and there's all sorts of unlocks for it. It's literally there's character unlocks, enemy unlocks, doing certain things in certain levels, completing a certain amount of deeds, leveling up your characters, equipping certain kinds of equipment. There's a ludicrous amount of loot boxes you can get from it, which is great because who doesn't like more loot?
Well, they added all the new cosmetics too for those loot boxes.
Yeah, and they just added a ton more cosmetics and into the game, and we're slowly building towards the first DLC, which we don't know a lot about yet. But all we know is it's going to be big.
Now I finally know what that damn book is that's always gleaming at the top of the tower.
All right. And with that, I think we're ready to transition, staying in Warhammer, but moving on to a game where a lot of us are a little bit more familiar with.
Mm-hmm. Total War Warhammer 2. And kind of, I guess, what would you say? Are we going to talk about DLC speculation? Are we going to talk about
the upcoming... We should start with the thing that's on everyone's mind first.
The Dark Elf Secret?
Move to DLC. Yes, the Dark Elf Secret. And also, hey, Bone Giant. So that was cool.
Right? I mean...
we got to talk about him for a minute. So for anyone who's living under a rock and maybe didn't see the update, if you have Total War Warhammer 2 and you bought the Tomb Kings edition, or the Tomb Kings back in January, December, you got a Bone Giant for free the other day. He's just added into the game for free, just nice free LC, which, with the exception of the Lich High Priest, now means that the Tomb King roster is complete. It's 100% done, which is so nice, and is of course the goal for every faction, at least for me. But the implication of the Bone Giant is kind of interesting, because a lot of people were 100% sure that we were never going to see monsters as free LC. At least not monsters that have custom animations and stuff. Like the Bone Giant, if you haven't had a chance to see him, he's a gorgeous model. He does have custom unique animations, and he works really well. He's actually very good at what he does. Granted, he's not overpowered by any means, but if you're looking for something to just mow down enemy heavy cav or do a pretty okay amount of consistent damage to enemy monsters, and it's an easy to defend artillery piece essentially, Bone Giant's a great pick.
Well, I really like Bone Giants just because it finishes the roster. I think that's like the only thing that's not in there now are tomb swarms, and I'm okay with that.
Well, I mean, we have tomb swarms in the game though.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of get them through what's his name.
You get them through the
invocation. Yeah,
invocation. Yeah.
Which I'm cool with. They're there in essence. They make sense the way they are now. And Bone Giant is, let's call it how it actually is. Necrolith Colossi. It's now in the game. Do I have some problems with it? Yes, because it's not undead. It's a construct. The game.
I honestly, so from what I've heard, that may be a bug.
Okay, good.
I do not think that was intentional. I think that was a bug that slipped through.
It had to, because I mean, like you read the actual description. It's like, oh, the blank by blank constructed. You're like, oh,
yeah. I asked someone about that. And the response was literally, "Oops." So
wait, undead?
It may be that whoever got the last say on it okayed it as an undead, but I think it's supposed to be a construct and someone just goofed. But more on that in the future.
Okay, good. That is at least comforting. I mean, the Bone Giant, the giant itself, the original giant, doesn't have a ton of applications. So the Bone Giant in and of itself is going to have the similar amount of limited applications. Is it like this thing, an auto pick for every time you choose Tomb Kings? I don't really think so. I mean, what's your opinion on it?
No.
Yeah, I mean,
But I think if you're fighting like high elves, for instance, I would always take a Bone Giant.
Oh yeah. I mean,
like Dragon Princes, he destroys Dragon Princes.
Yeah. And I mean, if you have him pretty well guarded, that Bone Giant's going to be shooting the entire match, or at least until he's out of ammunition.
Yeah, and he's not a slouch in close combat. He's kind of like the Sigmar. He's a good last bastion if the game gets close.
Dude, I haven't experienced him being great. Like I had him fight against a unit of Chosen that was like at fifth.
Oh no, he'll get whooped by Chosen. He doesn't have the stats for it.
Yeah, I mean, you look at him versus the Sigord, and he's more accurate and he does more range damage than the Sigor, but his melee capabilities are not as good as the Sigor. So you kind of have a trade-off between the two.
Yeah, well, they're different creatures.
Exactly.
The Bone Giant has much better defenses. I think he has higher armor and more health. But
it's more
where the Sigor is good about killing units with those laser-guided boulders, the Bone Giant is much better at killing cav and monsters
with his laser-guided MiG missile.
Yeah. But in any event, so let's talk about this Dark Elf mystery here.
What do you think it is? I mean,
so because of the allusion to, chains and a monstrous secret and all this other stuff, I have planted my oath stone, so to speak, on the fact that it is a monster. There, of course, I have seen speculation around the community that it's a new legendary lord or it's a new unit or yada yada yada, but I think that's all nonsense.
So for those of you guys who don't know, let me just read this little blurb here. This was the very bottom of kind of like the release notes for Queen of the Crone, or the announcement at least. It says, "But this is not all. The Druki possess a dark and powerful weapon. When blood runs in rivers and the air is choked with death," that's uppercase death, "the chains will break and this monstrous secret will be unleashed."
Yeah, so what I honestly think is that I'm not sure the way they word the prophecy, especially when they capitalize death, makes me think that we might have to wait until some kind of event or something. Hopefully not. Hopefully it's just them getting it out as fast as they can, unless they're just referring to Death Knight. But
I don't know. They're cheeky, dude. They're so cheeky with their.
They're very cheeky
with their hints and everything like that. Like I've seen so many things about it, and it's like, so let's talk about at least things that could be like Bloodwrack Medusa. I kind of think that's kind of like a shoe-in.
The Bloodwrack Medusa does seem, because the whole rivers of blood and all that stuff idea does seem like a very sensible. It's one of my two. I've got two on mine. So for those of you who don't know what the Bloodwrack Medusa is, A, play the Dark Elf campaign and complete the first ritual and you'll see one.
Oh, really?
But B, the Bloodwrack Medusa is essentially, it's very similar to the Greek myth, where there was a woman who was incredibly beautiful and one of the goddesses turned her into Medusa because she was jealous, and so she became a horrible monster that no one could ever look upon without turning to stone, yada yada. The Bloodwrack Medusa is very similar in that there was a coven of sorceresses who made the goddess of pleasure very upset because they were all incredibly beautiful, and she got jealous of them, and the only one of them to escape this fate was Morathi. And basically what happened was the goddess turned them into these horrible abominations we know as Bloodwrack Medusa, which are the exact same as the Greek Medusa, the only difference being it was an elf turned into a monster, so they're very, very fast and scary. And instead of turning you to stone if they gaze at you, instead what they do is they make blood seep out of all of your pores and your orifices, and you die very horribly and very quickly. The other thing they can do...
Oh, good.
Yeah. Oh, great. The other thing they can do is the reason they're called Bloodwrack Medusas, in addition to the blood staring thing, is because they can be mounted on basically a slightly altered shrine or blood cauldron.
It was a dual kit. It was a dual kit with that. Since we talked about it so much, it was a dual kit with the blood shrine.
Yeah, actually, both the things we're going to be talking about were dual kits. But so the Bloodwrack Shrine came with the Medusa on it, and you could run her by herself as a monster, though she was terrible, so nobody ever did. She was leadership 2. Or you could run her on the Shrine, where she was amazing. And what was scary about her on the Shrine was not only did you have a monstrous creature on a shrine, but she had this big, cauldron of blood in the center. But she used it, instead of using it to buff nearby allies by invoking a blood frenzy and giving them Kane's protection, she would use it to look into the future and could do crazy prophetic things, and she would buff nearby elves by making them all basically she would unleash secrets of cruelty, and the dark elves would get like really, really turned on by just like horrid.
I'm getting turned on just
cruelty.
hearing about it.
Yeah, and they would get massive damage buffs. So while the Blood Cauldron tended to be more of a defensive structure, the Bloodwrack Shrine was the offensive structure.
Yeah. And so you're saying that to mirror that, Bloodwrack Shrine with Bloodwrack Medusa, or just the Medusa itself?
I think if they're going to do... I'm personally not voting for the Medusa. But if they were to do the Medusa, I think they would do both, because it would be too easy not to do both.
Okay. Then what's your second guess then? What's your second?
My personal guess, which I think for a lot of people it's between those two monsters. In the chat, we'd love to hear your vote down in the description below, or down in the comments. But my personal vote is for the Charybdis.
The Hydra with vaginas for mouths.
Yes, which was the dual kit that came along with the Hydra. And for those of you who don't know, the Charybdis is this horrific sea monster from the deepest, darkest depths, who for some reason has legs instead of fins. That it's blind, essentially. It doesn't even have a face. It literally just has like all those necks that the Hydra has, but they just end in really scary looking mouths.
Yeah. Like
a giant leech on steroids.
But in the lore, like, it talks about summoning it up. Like they summon it up.
Yes, so the Dark Elves would perform a ritual, and they would basically cause these massive whirlpools, and they would drag these beasts out of the depths with chains and magic and bind them to the will of the Dark Elves. And many of them were hooked up to Black Arcs, and they would like drag the Black Arcs around, and then when the fight started, they would be unleashed, and they would come out of the ocean and attack everybody.
Well, chains. Okay, so I can see that. I can see that kind of like...
Yeah, they were the only sea monster that we've received in Warhammer, despite the fact that the sea monster was apparently... There was something was supposed to happen in 8th edition that didn't, because we got sea monster as a core rule in the core rulebook, so you could apply it to anything that had the sea monster keyword, and the Charybdis was the only sea monster we got in the entire edition. So I don't know. I think they got recycled into the Ivaneth Deep Kit, who are pretty awesome. In any event, though, but the Charybdis, what separates it from the Hydra, it's actually quite different from the Hydra. Where the Hydra is more of a hardcore armor-piercing anti-infantry thing that breathes fire, the Charybdis is a melee monster killer that specializes against killing monsters, and it has poisoned attacks.
Right,
but it does not regenerate.
Right.
So it's similar to the Hydra, but it's all about just killing shit in close combat. And it's very good against monsters, at least in tabletop. They were pretty rare to see due to the fact that they didn't have regen, and most Dark Elf players just like spamming infantry and Doomfire Warlocks. But
the chill of Centaur, dude. Now that's making a big comeback in a big way.
Yeah, but the Charybdis was a very nasty creature in combat. And of course, the other rule he had that made him very special is he had a unique rule called Abyssal Howl, which was a rule that made it so that all enemies that were around him had to re-roll leadership checks when it came to fear or terror, which made him very scary.
No pun intended.
Which in Total War could be interpreted as just a leadership debuff, which is really nice on terror causers.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see, people always like to say, the Dark Elves don't have their Beastmaster and stuff like that. Well, now that we've got Manticores, the only things we're missing are Medusas and Charybdis. I mean, we've got Harpies, We've got Dark Pegasi, we've got Black Dragons, we've got Manticores.
Yeah, the only thing the Dark Elves are missing at this point are literally some weird lord choices that 8th edition kind of tossed in. Also the Scourge Runner Chariot, but I don't think anyone really wants that.
Oh, God. Oh.
It has a harpoon!
Why did you remind me that existed? Like,
it has a harpoon! Who doesn't want a harpoon
Give
chariot?
me a Black Arc Fleetmaster before you give me that thing.
Yeah, really?
That's one of the 8th edition weird choices that we were talking about.
I guess to lead into the final conversation. So
you see what I did there? I intentionally put the Dark Elf DLC at the end so we'd lead back into a Dark Elf question.
Lord. In any event, so chat, we'd like to hear y'all's opinion. Do you think it's going to be the Blood Rack or the Charybdis? Personally, I'm voting Charybdis. Do you have a vote, Italian?
To be a contrarian, I'll say Medusa.
Oh man. Okay then. So chat, we'll have to see who chat sides with, and then we'll have to see who's wrong.
Probably me.
I hope so.
They're gonna side with me, and I'll be wrong. That's what I'm saying.
Oh man. Then I'll get to make all of chat look like a fool. It's perfect. So the final thing I think worth talking about before we get into the final question and head out for the day is, do you think there's going to be a DLC in June?
In June? No, I don't think so.
Okay, so what about July?
I think the next time we'll see a DLC is August.
August? Really? That's a long way away.
I'm saying DLC. FLC I could see in July.
Okay, any thoughts or speculations?
We're due on a Lizardman. FLC. We've gotten Rictus. We've gotten all sorts of goodies for High Elves and Dark Elves. When you press a campaign for Vortex or even for Mortal Empires, who do you see? Two Legendary Lords for Lizardmen. The roster just looks a little sad now by comparison. So, FLC for Lizardmen in July, going to be a Legendary Lord and or one unit. Mark my words. Mark my fucking words.
Interesting. Okay. My prediction is I think we're going to see... I do like your idea of the free LC Lizardman Lord being separate like Tretch was. However, I think it's too tempting for them to put him with the DLC. I think though the next DLC is going to be in July.
Really?
I'm voting for the Lizardman Skaven DLC because I can't
Gorok or 10
I'm thinking Gorok free LC.
Yeah, easy.
And then 10 and Juan versus Thankful. That's my vote.
Thankful. Okay, I can see that.
I know a lot of people are pushing for Icket, but I'm going Team Thankful.
Icket, honestly, like if I have to think of Legendary Lords to add, I never would have pegged Tretch, but Icket is not different enough from Skrulk. You know what? I don't know. That's not a fair statement.
He's pretty heavily armored.
Yeah, it's
like he does have that. He's kind of a cool warlock character.
Yeah, I would say that's not a fair statement.
Here's my thing with the Skaven. They need 3 more lords, and I'll leave them alone. They have to give us 3 more lords. I need my Thankful, I need my Icket Claw, and I need my Throt the Unclean.
Oh, Throt, that's right. Throt. You need Throt.
Yeah, if they want to be cheeky with Thankful and throw in like a goofy right where you could summon Deathmaster Stitch, I wouldn't be upset either.
Ooh, that'd be really cool. Ooh.
Yeah, I don't think he would ever work as a Legendary Lord, but if he could be something kind of similar to what Nagaroth has, I would be totally down for that.
Dude, and if they added Malice Darkblade and added in what's Deathblade, Darkblade? What's the name of the Grandmaster Assassin for Dark Elves?
Oh, Shadowblade.
Shadowblade. And if he had to write that summon Shadowblade, that would be on point. Because Malice Darkblade is all about like doing what he can to get ahead.
Throwing them all at each other and watching them die. Shadowblade's interesting just because he's such a big part of the game already. Because for those of you who haven't played the Dark Elf storyline, the assassin who's the huge part of the Dark Elf storyline is Shadowblade.
Oh,
It's literally the Vortex campaign is all about Shadowblade.
spoiler to me, man. Jeez.
Well, if you haven't played through it by now, I don't feel bad for you.
Well, I played through it. I just never did any of the rights. I was always trying to wait through.
Okay, if you start a Hellebron campaign, read the opening paragraph.
Okay, fine.
Shadowblade.
Touche.
But the epilogue for the Dark Elves is actually all about Shadowblade. So I don't know. Maybe we'll see him play a role at some point, but we'll have to see. In any event, I've got to ask my closing question to you about Dark Elves, and then we've got to wrap up because we're running on time.
Close me out.
Okay, so we're doing Dark Elves today,
Mm-hmm.
and you asked me a kind of interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
So my question to you.
It's not going to be as good as mine, but go ahead.
Hold on. I'll think of something. Okay.
An hour and 5 minutes to think of
Would
one.
you rather... I don't know if I'm going to be able to...
I win. It sounds like I win.
God.
Damn
okay,
it.
no, I got it. You know what? I got another slave question for you.
Shit.
So, would you rather be a slave in Kar, the slave market city, and all the things that happened there?
Oh, I know what you're going to say. Or Harganet.
Or would you rather be a slave in Clarkarand, the Beastmaster city, knowing what happens to them there?
Ooh, okay. I thought you were going to say Harganeth, where I have to deal with the Death Knight.
Nah, that's too obvious.
Okay. You know, I'd say Clark.
Would you rather be part of the hopeless masses that probably live a long life, or would you rather be beast fodder?
Honestly, Clark Karen, because then I have a chance of just kind of slipping into obscurity. If it's the Beastmasters, then I'm going to be fed to a vagina mouth monster Charybdis to pull a black arc through the water. Who knows? I don't want to have to deal with being fed to any number of the monsters that the Dark Elves have access to.
So you'd rather be a pseudo Skaven slave in Kar?
Absolutely. Because then what happens is Olithanar comes and liberates the city and takes it, and I become a high elf. How great does that sound?
Oh man, I forgot about that. I didn't even think about that option. If only I realized that we were taking the starting position into account.
You know what, man? Learn the lore. That's all I gotta say. You're all so
right,
angry.
maybe. Oh, I actually can maybe think of a fun subject for next time. In any event, I think that's gonna wrap us up for today. So if you want to close us out, we're good to go.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us here, guys, for our second episode of Casthammer. We'll be doing another one here in the next week or two to come, and we'll be covering on more topics. If there's any topics you'd like us to cover or any subjects that you really want us to hit on, please go ahead and make comments below about those. Let us know what your thoughts are. Also, feel free to let us know what you guys think about some of the subjects we are covering, or maybe your opinions on some of the stuff we've covered. Hey, do you like Age of Sigmar 2.0? Is the Imperial Knights Codex really going to fly off the shelves for you, or are you jazzed on Chaosbane? Any number of the things that we covered, we're more than happy to talk about them in our next episode. Maybe we'll even kind of find some way to do an email kind of thing where you can mail into us and we'll talk about either something you suggest.
That would probably be smart.
Yeah, I'll figure out a way to do it. There's probably some sort of web app that does it. But without further ado, guys, thanks for stopping by here. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. You'll see a link to Loremaster Sotek's channel. If you're on my channel, you'll see probably a link to my channel, hopefully, if you're on Loremaster Sotek's channel.
Nah, it'll just be to my Patreon. No,
son of a bitch.
Just kidding.
But thanks for dropping in here today, guys. Have a good one and take care.